I didn't think anything could feel ordinary after that day. But the strangest part is how quietly it all began to fall apart. For most of my life, my family was the one constant I never questioned. We were close in the way people assume families are close. Holidays without negotiation, weekends that defaulted to home, a shared understanding that we belonged to one another. I grew up in the suburbs of Minneapolis with my younger brother and sister, and later, we all went to the same university, tracing the same paths without ever really talking about it. Minnesota felt permanent. So did they. I met Stacy during my sophomore year of college. She folded into my life easily, as if she'd always been meant to be there. By the time I proposed last December, there was nothing dramatic about it. It felt inevitable. We talked about staying in Minnesota, about buying a house not far from my parents, about a future that looked a lot like the past, just expanded. If someone had told me then how temporary all of it was, I would have laughed. In April, I came home early one afternoon. There was no sense of dread, no intuition warning me to turn around. I unlocked the door, walked into our bedroom, and saw my brother and my fiance in bed together. I don't remember yelling. I don't remember what they said. I remember the room feeling smaller than it had any right to be, and the certainty that something had broken beyond repair. I left. I told her to get out later. That part feels hazy now, like my mind refused to catalog it carefully. A few days later, she came back to talk. She said she had fallen in love with my brother over time, that it wasn't planned, that she was sorry. She said it calmly, almost gently, as if naming something that had simply occurred. I didn't argue. I blocked them both and tried to accept that the life I had been building no longer existed. At first, my family rallied around me. My brother was uninvited from gatherings. There were texts and phone calls filled with anger on my behalf. I let myself believe that loyalty still meant something immutable. I focused on work. I slept. I started to heal in the shallow, tentative way you do when you think the worst part is already behind you. Then, in early November, my boss called me into his office. The Chicago branch was struggling, he said. They needed someone steady, someone they trusted. He asked if I would consider leading it. I surprised myself by saying yes almost immediately. I'd never planned to leave Minnesota, but the idea of distance felt like oxygen. The plan was to move after Christmas. I would tell my family at Thanksgiving, spend one last holiday season with them, and then go. I didn't get that chance. Thanksgiving at my parents' house was loud, the way it always was. Cars lined the street. I walked in without noticing my brothers, distracted by the familiar sounds of people I'd known my whole life. The first thing I saw was Stacy standing beside my brother, talking to my aunt like nothing had changed. My body stopped before my mind did. No one seemed surprised to see me. No one moved to intercept the moment. My parents called me into the living room. Everyone gathered, seating themselves with an unspoken gravity. I sat away from my brother and Stacy, but I noticed my sister chose not to. My mother spoke about how wrong what they'd done was, how painful it had been, how much she hated seeing the family divided. She talked about forgiveness as if it were a task on a timeline, something overdue. My brother and Stacy tried to apologize. I raised my hand and asked them to stop. Then, I asked my sister if she agreed with our mother. She was crying when she nodded. I asked my father. He didn't hesitate. That was the moment I understood I was alone in a room full of people who had decided my pain was inconvenient. I stood up and walked out. Someone called after me. I didn't turn around. I drove until I ended up at a McDonald's, sat in my car, and ate a meal that tasted like nothing. I didn't cry. I just felt hollow, as if something essential had been quietly removed while I wasn't paying attention. By the time I finished eating, the decision felt obvious. I couldn't keep negotiating my worth inside a family that had already made its choice. I blocked everyone. I gave up the phone plan I shared with my parents and got my own number. It cost more, but it felt cleaner. I told my boss I wanted to move early. The landlord agreed to let me into the apartment sooner than planned. I left Minnesota on December 15th without telling anyone. Chicago was cold and unfamiliar and exactly what I needed. I focused on unpacking, on learning the streets, on work that demanded my attention in ways grief didn't. For a while, the silence from my family felt like relief. Then, last night, I got a message request on Instagram. A new profile, no photos. The name was close enough to my mother's to make the intention clear. She asked why I would move without telling them. She said the family missed me, that they loved me, that I still needed to come home for Christmas. I stared at the message longer than I expected to. I thought about the living room, about the nods, about how easily my absence had been accepted as the price of peace. I replied once. I told her she had one son now, that I wasn't part of the family anymore. Then I blocked the account, locked down everything else, and sat in the quiet of my new apartment. I'm thinking about changing my last name. I don't know if I will. Some things take time to decide. What I do know is that the life I left behind no longer belongs to me, and maybe it never really did. Chicago doesn't know me yet, and that feels like a gift.